Have you ever felt like someone celebrated your success, but something in their eyes told a different story? That quiet discomfort, that half smile that feels like a warning. Envy doesn't always show up with loud insults or direct attacks. Sometimes it walks beside you, nodding, pretending to cheer you on while secretly hoping you fall. And that's where the real danger lives. The most powerful enemies are not the ones who oppose you openly, but the ones who stay close, watching, mimicking, judging. Recognizing them requires more than emotional intelligence. It demands strategy, self-mastery, and a deep understanding of human behavior. It's where leadership and philosophy merge. And yes, Machiavelli would agree. Power isn't just about what you say or do. It's about what you see before others see it. Authority starts in silence, in your ability to detect subtle patterns, like how someone's energy shifts when you win, how their voice trembles when they say, "I'm happy for you." Influence begins by understanding what threatens it. You're about to discover the 7 silent behaviors of the envious, not the ones they admit to, the ones they can't hide. These are patterns that reveal weakness disguised as friendship, manipulation wrapped in support, and sabotage masked as concern. Knowing them gives you power. Applying them gives you dominance. Don't just listen for confirmation. Listen to confront. This is a form of personal development that no one teaches in school. It's emotional, spiritual, and strategic, and it's essential for those who want to protect their peace, their influence, and their inner authority. Some of what you'll hear may remind you of someone close, maybe even too close. And here's the twist. You might also see traces of these behaviors in yourself. That's not a reason to retreat. That's your chance to evolve. True self-awareness begins where denial ends. So, pay attention to the details, the tone, the timing, the silent competition in conversations, the subtle tension when you succeed. These moments are not accidents. They're reflections of something deeper. Comment later on which one hit hardest. You might help someone else open their eyes too. Let's begin with the first behavior, one that reveals far more than it hides. Lack of empathy. It's not just a flaw, it's a red flag and a test of your emotional intelligence.
Lack of empathy. An envious person doesn't lack emotions. They lack the ability to feel someone else's. They don't celebrate your growth because your success feels like their failure. And in their eyes, your happiness is an accusation. Empathy is a form of emotional leadership. When it's absent, strategy must take its place. Machiavelli would say, never trust a man who cannot rejoice in another's fortune. Why? Because power grows in the soil of shared victories, but envy refuses to share. It isolates, turning admiration into resentment. What should inspire them insults them, and they don't even realize it. That's why their support feels hollow. They'll say, "I'm happy for you," but you'll sense a pause, a tightening of the jaw, eyes that don't match their words. It's subtle, but it's real. And if you ignore it, you risk inviting poison into your inner circle. Leadership requires discernment. Empathy requires self-mastery, and the envious are prisoners of comparison. They're too consumed by what they don't have to honor what you've earned. This creates emotional tension in every interaction. You share joy, they return silence. You offer trust, they give you distance. Want a real-world test? Share a genuine win with someone. Watch their reaction. Not the words, the energy. Do they lean in with curiosity or pull away with discomfort? That's not about mood, that's about emotional integrity. Strategy means observing the small, because the small always reveals the truth. Empathy isn't weakness, it's influence in its purest form. But to influence, you must protect your emotional energy. And to protect it, you must identify those who drain it with their silent bitterness. Power without awareness is like a sword without a hand to guide it. Now ask yourself, how often have you dismissed that gut feeling? That moment where something felt off, but you gave them the benefit of the doubt? Authority begins when you stop explaining away disrespect and start decoding it. Respect is not just earned, it's recognized or withheld. Lack of empathy is just the beginning, a symptom of a deeper insecurity that craves validation through measurement. Which brings us to the next behavior, the one that operates like a silent mirror, always watching, always comparing.
Constant comparison is a trap disguised as curiosity. The envious don't just look at your success, they measure themselves against it. It's not about admiration, it's about ranking. Who's ahead? Who's behind? Machiavelli would call it silent warfare, the kind that happens without a single word being spoken. They scroll through social media not for inspiration, but for ammunition. Every promotion you get, every post you make, triggers a quiet storm inside them. You didn't offend them, you simply reminded them of what they haven't achieved. That's not your burden, but it will become your problem if you don't notice it. Leadership demands that you see beyond appearances. The one who laughs with you may be building a secret scoreboard in their mind. Why them, not me, is the question envy repeats like a broken mantra. And as long as they compare, they will quietly compete, even when you're not playing the same game. You'll notice it in their comments. Subtle jabs, fake praise, backhanded compliments. Must be nice to have connections, they'll say. Or you're lucky. These are not jokes. They are defense mechanisms, strategies to protect a fragile ego that can't accept someone else's growth without feeling smaller. Comparison reveals a lack of self-mastery. When someone constantly weighs their value through others, they surrender their identity. Power fades. Authority weakens. They stop leading their own lives and start reacting to yours. And worse, they expect you to apologize for shining. In practical terms, limit how much you share with people who constantly compare. If someone always finds a way to turn your joy into their jealousy, they don't need access to your highlights. Strategy sometimes means silence, not out of fear, but to preserve influence. Your growth shouldn't be a threat, but to those addicted to comparison, it is. And no amount of explaining, reassuring, or dimming your light will fix that. The only thing that grows in comparison is insecurity. And if you allow it near you, it multiplies. But this habit of measuring themselves against you leads to something worse, something far more venomous. Not only do they compare, they start minimizing everything you accomplish. And that's the next sign every powerful mind needs to watch for.
Diminishing others' achievements. When someone can't match your success, they try to shrink it. That's a classic envy strategy. If I can't have what you have, I'll make it seem worthless. They'll say, it's not a big deal, or anyone could have done that. But that comment isn't about you. It's a reflection of their own frustration. Machiavelli would call this a defensive maneuver of the weak. Instead of building their own empire, they throw stones at yours. Diminishing others becomes a cheap strategy to restore a wounded ego. It feels easier to reduce your light than to confront their own shadow. Pay attention to people who downplay your effort. You worked for months, and they say you got lucky. You built something from nothing, and they call it a phase. That's not observation, it's subtle sabotage. Power means recognizing when praise is poisoned. This behavior often comes wrapped in humor. Relax, it's not like you're a genius, they'll say with a smile, but behind the laughter is discomfort. True leadership recognizes this pattern, because what they belittle in you, they fear they'll never reach in themselves. You don't need to fight back. You just need to see clearly. The moment you stop needing validation from those who envy you is the moment your authority expands. Self-mastery isn't about silencing others, it's about becoming immune to their noise. Here's a simple action. When someone tries to downplay your win, ask them directly, "What do you mean by that?" Most won't have the courage to answer. That's when influence flips. They lose control of the narrative. You reclaim your power without raising your voice. When someone constantly tries to level the field by tearing you down, they reveal their strategy. They don't want equality. They want you smaller so they can feel taller. But once you stop apologizing for rising, they'll either distance themselves or expose themselves. And from here, the envy deepens, because if diminishing you doesn't work, they stop pretending to be happy for you altogether. That's when the mask starts to slip, and what comes next is even more revealing.
Can't celebrate your success. One of the clearest signs of envy is silence during your victories. When you rise, they go quiet, not because they're busy, because they're bitter. They can't celebrate your success because your achievement exposes what they haven't done. And instead of using it as inspiration, they see it as a threat. True leadership celebrates others without fear, but envy operates like a mirror. It doesn't see you, it sees its own failure reflected. So when you win, the envious person feels defeated. Not because you harmed them, but because you reminded them of their own stagnation. They might say, "Congratulations," but listen to the energy. Do they make it about you, or do they shift it to themselves? "I was going to do that too," or "I thought of that first." Those aren't affirmations, they're shields against insecurity. Strategy means noticing what isn't being said. Machiavelli would warn against trusting those who only clap when you're down, because when you're up, their silence is deafening. Celebration requires self-mastery. It takes strength to acknowledge someone else's growth without questioning your own. You may have noticed it before. You share a win, and they change the subject. Or worse, they find a flaw in your success. But is it really sustainable? Or let's see how long it lasts. These aren't curious questions. They're attempts to make you second-guess your worth. If you want to test this pattern, do it subtly. Share a personal milestone. Watch who genuinely smiles and who looks uncomfortable. Real allies want to see you rise. Envious ones only support you when you're struggling. That's not loyalty, it's control. Don't let their discomfort become your limitation. Authority means walking proudly in your purpose, even when others feel uneasy. Influence isn't about shrinking for others, it's about expanding, so others have permission to do the same. But some would rather you stay small. And when silent envy fails to contain you, a darker desire begins to grow. The wish that you fall, not by accident, but so they can finally feel like you're back where they belong, below them.
Secretly wants you to fail. They smile at you in public, but in private, they hope you fall. Not because you're evil, but because your success makes them feel invisible. That's the cruel twist of envy. It doesn't just hurt, it wishes harm. Not loud, not obvious, but subtle, silent, strategic.
Machiavelli would describe this as passive sabotage. The envious rarely act directly. They don't push you, they wait for you to trip. And when you do, they whisper, "I knew it." Not because they saw the future, but because they needed that fall to feel balanced again. You'll feel it in the way they respond to your momentum. When you're building something, they don't ask questions. When things slow down, they show sudden interest. "Are you okay?" they ask, with a look that says, "Finally." Power is knowing when concern is really celebration. This desire to see you fail often hides behind advice. Don't burn out. Be careful. It might be too much. On the surface, it's care. But dig deeper, and it's fear. Fear that you'll go further than they ever did. That kind of fear doesn't want you safe. It wants you stuck. Self-mastery means noticing these micro signals. Who claps louder when you lose than when you win? Who offers help only when you're low, but vanishes when you're thriving? Leadership means protecting your path even from those who pretend to walk beside you. To test this, share your goals, not the small ones, the bold ones. See who leans in with encouragement and who subtly tries to tame your ambition. The envious don't fear your ideas, they fear your execution. And they'll try to water down your fire with doubt. This hidden wish for your failure is often subconscious. They may not admit it even to themselves, but you'll feel it in your gut. And ignoring it means inviting someone into your camp who dreams of your defeat. Influence means protecting your energy, not just your image. And when cheering against you no longer works, they shift tactics again. They crave attention, and if they can't get it from achievement, they'll demand it through drama. And that is our next lesson.
Constant need for attention and validation. The envious crave the spotlight, not to shine, but to survive. Their identity is built on the applause of others. When they see you receiving recognition, it feels like oxygen being taken from them. Their strategy? Redirect attention back to themselves, subtly, relentlessly. Machiavelli would call this a desperation for perceived relevance. Power doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. But the envious lack that authority, so they compensate. They interrupt your moment, insert themselves into your story, and turn every room into a silent competition. You'll notice it when they can't stay quiet during your wins. You speak about your achievement, they cut in with their own. You share your success, they share a struggle, not to connect, but to shift the narrative. They don't want support, they want the spotlight. This need isn't harmless. It drains your energy and distorts the dynamic. Instead of celebrating your growth, you end up managing their emotions. That's not influence, that's manipulation. And over time, it costs you more than you realize. Respect, peace, momentum. Self-mastery requires boundaries. Not all attention-seeking behavior is toxic, but when it's constant, it signals insecurity disguised as charisma. True leadership is quiet confidence. Those who truly lead don't chase attention, they attract it through substance. Want an example? Pay attention to how often this person talks about themselves. Do they ask about your goals or just wait for their turn to speak? A powerful strategy is simple. Stop feeding the hunger. Don't reward drama with focus. Let silence do the work. This thirst for validation is rooted in emotional dependence. And when they don't get it, They become unstable, jealous, moody, reactive. Influence demands emotional independence, and anyone who needs applause to feel alive is one step away from envy turning to sabotage. And when attention no longer satisfies them, they find a darker narrative, one where they are always the victim, always wronged, never responsible. And that illusion of injustice, that's what we'll confront next.
Victim mentality. The envious rarely see themselves as the villain. In their minds, they're always the ones being wronged. Every success you achieve becomes a reminder of what they didn't get, and that, to them, is an injustice. It's not that you worked hard, it's that life was unfair to them. Machiavelli would warn, a victim with a bitter heart is more dangerous than an open enemy. They manipulate perception. They tell stories designed to gain sympathy. I was overlooked. No one supports me. The subtext is clear. You owe me. And if you don't pay that emotional debt, they resent you for it. This mindset becomes their entire identity. It's always the boss's fault, the spouse, the market, the childhood, but never their own choices. They weaponize blame like a shield. Strategy means recognizing this not as weakness, but as camouflage, because under the pain lives a refusal to grow. You'll spot it when they talk. Every story is colored by injustice. Nothing is ever fair. When others succeed, it's favoritism. When they fail, it's sabotage. This narrative makes them feel safe, but it also keeps them stuck. And stuck people rarely celebrate movement in others. True leadership requires self-accountability, the power to say, what did I do to contribute to this? But those stuck in a victim mindset avoid this question at all costs. Why? Because answering it would mean admitting they've always had the ability to change. A good test? Offer them a solution. Watch how quickly they resist it. That won't work for me. You don't understand my situation. They don't want a way out. They want permission to stay the same. And they want your empathy without your progress. When you refuse to enable that cycle, expect resistance. They may call you cold, arrogant, even selfish. But that's the cost of self-mastery, releasing the guilt that others project onto you. Your authority isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity is often misunderstood for indifference. But this mask of victimhood doesn't hold forever. Eventually, envy starts eating itself. When blaming others no longer soothes them, the bitterness turns inward. And that's when the real danger begins. The part where envy doesn't just observe your rise, it tries to obstruct it.
Emotional self-destruction through envy. Envy is not just destructive to others, it devours the one who feels it. Slowly, it poisons their perception until nothing is ever enough. The envious person lives in constant pain, not because of what you did, but because of what they refuse to become. Their emotions become their cage. Machiavelli would say, a person ruled by envy is no longer a player in the game. They are a pawn of their own suffering. Every comparison adds fuel to their frustration. Every success they witness feels like salt on a wound. And instead of healing, they scratch it deeper. This leads to emotional implosion. They start seeing enemies where there are none. Opportunities feel like threats. Relationships become battlefields. Even joy feels suspicious. Their inner world is so filled with resentment that peace becomes impossible, no matter how much they chase it externally. They may still smile, still post, still pretend, but internally they are at war, not with you, with themselves. And no amount of validation, attention, or applause can silence the voice inside that says, "You're not enough." That voice isn't yours to fix, but it is yours to protect yourself from. Leaders must recognize when someone is no longer self-aware, because when envy becomes emotional identity, reason vanishes. The envious can sabotage themselves just to sabotage you. It's not logical. It's emotional warfare disguised as wounded pride. You'll often hear contradictions. "I'm fine, I don't care," followed by obsessive attention to your moves. They'll say they're above it while secretly tracking your every post. That's not detachment. That's obsession wrapped in denial, and it's draining for both of you. Self-mastery means detaching from emotional vampires, not with hate, but with discernment. Sometimes the most powerful move is not confronting the envious, but becoming unavailable to their chaos, because proximity is permission, and some people should never have access to your peace. But when envy turns inward, it doesn't end with sadness. It seeks justification. And the easiest way to justify pain is to find a target. That's when envy stops being silent and begins to act. And what it does next, that's what separates discomfort from danger.
Ignoring the signs, your responsibility. Most people don't miss the signs, they ignore them. The sarcastic comments, the fake applause, the backhanded compliments, they were always there, but we silence our intuition with hope. We tell ourselves they'll change, or I'm overreacting. But Machiavelli would call that dangerous naivete. In the game of power, ignorance is not bliss, it's vulnerability. When you ignore patterns of envy, you invite them closer. You let them study you, infiltrate your space, and weaponize your trust. That's not compassion. That's self-betrayal. And in time, it costs you more than it spares them. You are responsible for protecting your energy. You don't owe access to those who consistently disrespect it. Self-mastery is knowing when to walk away, not with anger, but with clarity, because your peace should never depend on someone else's healing. Often, we confuse loyalty with sacrifice. We stay around toxic envy thinking we're being strong, but real strength is strategic. It doesn't sit beside a fire hoping it won't burn. It builds walls, it draws lines, it exits quietly before destruction becomes inevitable. Here's something practical. Write down 3 people whose presence drains your energy. Then ask, am I hoping they'll change, or am I seeing them clearly? Leadership means confronting emotional debt. You're not cruel for cutting cords, you're wise for preserving your stability. The envious rarely become less envious with time. They become better at hiding it. And the more they know about you, the sharper their aim. Don't confuse time spent with trust earned. Some people should never have made it past your front gate. Influence comes with responsibility. If you're building something powerful, expect shadows to follow. The stronger your light, the darker the envy becomes. Your awareness isn't paranoia, it's protection. And once you see clearly, you must act accordingly. Because ignoring the signs leads to a silent betrayal. One that doesn't explode, it erodes. And when the erosion becomes collapse, you'll wish you had taken one step sooner. The question is, will you take that step now or wait for the final one?
Make the right decision. How to deal with the envious. When envy reveals itself, you have a choice. Engage or exit. But the worst decision is indecision. Letting envious people stay in your life just because creates slow sabotage. Machiavelli would advise clarity over kindness, because strategy demands action, not sentiment. Sometimes removing someone doesn't mean confrontation. It means distance, less sharing, less energy, less access. Influence isn't just about who you attract, it's about who you filter. And filtering envious people isn't cruelty, it's power in practice. Ask yourself, what is this relationship costing me? Energy? Peace? Confidence? Most people underestimate the slow drain of envy. It doesn't shout, it chips away, little by little, until you don't recognize yourself, until your fire burns lower, and you wonder why. Dealing with envy starts with observation, but ends with decision. No explanation needed, no drama required, just quiet adjustments. Fewer invitations, fewer openings, and a mindset that says, I deserve to be supported, not studied. That's what self-respect looks like. There's a myth that being strong means keeping everyone around, but strength is selective. Strategy means building a life that lifts you, and anyone who drags you down should lose access. You're not closing your heart, you're defending your destiny. A good practice is audit your circle. Who celebrates your wins without envy? Who speaks your name with respect when you're not in the room? Who makes you feel safe to dream bigger? That's your tribe. The rest are shadows, and shadows only exist where your light shines. And here's the truth. You don't need to expose the envious. Life will do that for you. Just keep growing, keep winning, and keep mastering yourself. Their mask will fall on its own. Your only job is to keep walking, unshaken, unapologetic, unavailable to nonsense. Because the moment you remove envy from your life, something else takes its place. Clarity, peace, power. And when you finally walk with full awareness, nothing and no one can keep you from becoming untouchable.
Now that you've seen the 7 behaviors, who came to mind first? Was it a friend, a coworker, someone in your family? Or maybe, just maybe, you recognized pieces of yourself in those patterns. Don't judge it, just face it. Awareness is where self-mastery begins. Ask yourself, how many times have you ignored the signs just to keep someone close? How much of your energy has been stolen by subtle envy? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you finally set the right boundaries? Most people never make that move. They stay stuck, drained by invisible tension, and confused by mixed signals. But not you. You've just unlocked the blueprint. And the question now isn't if you'll use it, it's when. Because clarity without action is still sabotage. What part of this video hit you hardest? Which behavior opened your eyes the most? Your insight might help someone else wake up too. Drop it in the comments. Someone's going to read it and realize they're not crazy, they're just finally seeing the game. And if this video shifted your perspective even a little, imagine what the next one will do. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join the tribe that's rising with strategy, not noise. Watch the next video that's showing up right now on the screen, or check the link in the description. It connects directly with what you just learned. Miss it, and you might miss the rest of the playbook.